We're speaking with Lily Geismer, author of Left Behind, The Democrats' Failed Attempt to Solve Inequality. You know, one of the, I think maybe the most important closing topic, and we look at, kind of how we are where we are today. I think a lot of that has to do with education. You're a professor at one of the most expensive colleges in the country. Granted, it is private, but we're obviously big advocates for tuition-free public college, the elimination of student debt. If there was tuition-free public college, for example, at UCLA, it would be a lot harder to justify $60,000 a year for a private liberal arts college, and they would have to compete. And so I think one of the byproducts of neoliberalism through the Reagan and Clinton years is the massive increase in costs for college. And part of the problem with that is this bureaucratized institutions. I believe Claremont, Scripps, schools like that. There's maybe about 1,500 to 2,000 the student body, but you could have a dozen vice presidents making, $250,000 a year. And so when people are wondering, why does it cost so much to send our kids to these schools, and the teachers are not being paid well there, ladies and gentlemen. Don't think that they're making these crazy salaries. Right. That ain't happening. Do you see that as being sort of a flashpoint in many ways in terms of where we need to go in the future to solve a lot of these problems, especially economically?
Oh, I think hugely. And I think the other piece that's sort of there too, that links back to the book and the Democratic Party, has been this promotion of education as the solution to all problems. So this pushing of, one of the things I think that, since the 70s, the mainstream Democrats have pushed the idea of kind of worker retraining. So the idea of it's okay that your job is being sent out. You can just go become a tech worker. And so that I think of it with the coal miners to coders, like that. But there's so many variations of that has been pushed. And but the other side of that is that it's critical to everyone to get a college education. And that has then pushed colleges to be able to sort of sell that in various different ways. And I think there's many benefits to a college education, but I do think that the ways in which it has created just profound debt in parts of the population. And I do think one of the key things to deal with inequality in the United States is just to cancel the student debt, and that's something that can be done without Congress. That is an executive action. So that's one piece of it. But I do think there's going to be, there's a reckoning that's happening with college. The other piece of it to talk about, I'm fortunate to be a tenured professor, but I am a dying breed. So many the places that when we think about contingent work, a huge component of that is within academia, where many people are working, getting paid about $3,000 a course to teach 5 courses at several different institutions, and that's happening at the public and private level. So I think that's a huge question about the sort of reckoning that's happened within colleges. But at the same time, what is being paid for now, but I thought about this a lot because of the sort of promotion of entrepreneurship, which is a part of the being your own boss, which is that's going to sort of save the new economy and it can work with low-income workers. That's actually where a lot of money is going, is these centers for entrepreneurship. And so there's paying of administrators to do that kind of work. And I think there's there's just a huge way that is sort of a bloat on both our education system and our economy.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I'd never thought of it this way when you were talking about sort of back on the education issue. So at the same time when the Republicans were pushing vouchers, is when the Democrats were pushing charters. And it seemed like at the time, I remember at the time, it seemed so obvious that charters was a better idea than vouchers. It was so obvious to me. And now they're both sort of branches of the same problem. They're both doing the same thing essentially, which is siphoning money from the public schools, just in different ways. And yet the Democrats were able to sell this as if it was some sort of, good liberal education policy.
Yeah, well, the idea is it was bringing more efficiency and making things more competitive and sort of more accountable. And I think, it's not one of the things that, initially the idea for charter schools actually came from Albert Schenker was the head of the American Federation for Teachers. So I think there's the way that it came from actually many teachers being like, this will give us a chance to kind of experiment. So there's not there that at its kernel, there's, at the beginning of its sort of origins are some of those ideas, but they have been used in various different ways. And now you have large school systems, like this is LA as a classic example where there's with a high number of charters that actually don't have the same kind of accountability that the typical public school does, and often are being run by these private entities.
Yeah, for profit. And one of the things that's interesting here in Florida is that we actually have a charter school in Broward County that's called Pembroke Pines Charter, and it's run by the municipality, and it isn't as a profit. And the result is it's an amazingly good charter school. It actually is a really good charter. And in fact, it's really one of the only ones that I know of that is a really good school. And I think that really speaks volumes that it's the one that isn't from a for-profit corporation.
Gee, I wonder why. And I think that if you were to look at it from the perspective of, and everyone is like, well, if only our states were more blue and this would solve the problem. You're in the bluest one of them all, and it looks like there is a really high cost of living in California that's making it near impossible for anyone to survive. And of course, in Los Angeles or San Francisco, it goes without saying, it really is impossible to survive on a middle-class income.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's another, that is something that actually, I wrote another book about suburban liberals in Massachusetts. And so the ways in which the kind of bluest states often have the highest amounts of inequality and racial segregation too is something I think that is really important to think through as well. And that we can see that writ large, actually, in large questions about kind of Democratic Party, both strategy and policy. So I do think that one of the things with California is like the ways in which kind of its blueness has obscured some of these just sort of persistent problems of inequity are something that I see playing out every day. So I know California and Florida are now in some sort of weird, our governors are in some weird battle, but the problems in both places constitute
I wouldn't.
I think it shows that it doesn't even matter red or blue. I think that it would, like, we have serious housing issues. You have serious housing issues. Our climate issues are not being addressed properly. Neither are yours. So it's just interesting. Newsom shut down the state for the pandemic, and DeSantis had everything open. And yet apparently the numbers have borne out in the after effect as being kind of the same. So I think it's kind of interesting that we're really seeing that there really is no difference in this color war.
Yeah, I think there is. I think that there are certain issues that doesn't always play out, and I think abortion has shown that. But I do think on a lot of these questions around economic inequity, the sort of coloration is different. It doesn't have the same power that it's often purported to.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.